On a cold March night in 1990, two men dressed as police officers walked into a museum in Boston. 81 minutes later, they walked out carrying priceless masterpieces. No alarm stopped them. No police chased them. No witnesses saw where they went. And more than 3 decades later, not a single one of the most valuable stolen paintings has been recovered. The crime would become the largest art theft in history. A heist so audacious that even today, the FBI continues to search for answers. A mystery worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A mystery hidden behind empty picture frames. This is the story of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist. The greatest art robbery the world has ever seen. And perhaps, the perfect crime. Long before the robbery, there was a woman. A woman who refused to live by society's rules. Her name was Isabella Stewart Gardner. Born into wealth in the 19th century, Isabella spent much of her life traveling across Europe, collecting paintings, sculptures, manuscripts, and artifacts from different civilizations. But she wasn't interested in simply owning beautiful things. She wanted to create something immortal. Something that would outlive her. And so, in the heart of Boston, she built a museum unlike any other in America. Visitors entering the museum felt as though they had stepped through a portal into Renaissance Italy. Sunlight filtered through a magnificent glass courtyard. Ancient columns stood beside rare paintings. Every room was arranged exactly according to Isabella's personal vision. Nothing was accidental. Every object had a purpose. Every painting had a place. And before her death, Isabella left behind one extraordinary instruction. The museum could never be permanently altered. The collection must remain exactly as she arranged it. No matter what happened. No matter what was lost. No matter what was stolen. At the time, nobody could have imagined how important that final wish would become. By the late 1980s, Boston was a city in transition. Historic neighborhoods stood alongside growing business districts. Old organized crime families still cast long shadows across the city. Police departments battled corruption scandals. Federal investigators pursued mob figures. And beneath the surface, a criminal underworld continued to operate in secret. Yet none of that seemed connected to the Gardner Museum. The museum wasn't a bank. It wasn't Fort Knox. It wasn't guarded by heavily armed security teams. Instead, it relied on a surprisingly simple security system. A handful of guards, basic surveillance cameras, and trust. Perhaps too much trust. Looking back, investigators would later describe the museum as vulnerable. Not because the artwork lacked value, but because nobody believed anyone would dare attempt such a crime. The masterpieces hanging inside those walls were internationally famous. Too famous to sell. Too recognizable to display. Too important to disappear. Or so everyone thought. March 17, 1990. Boston erupted in celebration. Bars overflowed with crowds. Music echoed through the streets. Thousands gathered to celebrate St. Patrick's Day weekend. For police officers, it was one of the busiest nights of the year. For criminals, it was an opportunity. As midnight approached, the city slowly began to settle. The crowds dispersed. The streets quieted. And across Boston, most people returned home, unaware that history was about to unfold. Inside the Gardner Museum, the overnight shift had begun. 2 security guards watched over one of the world's most valuable art collections. Neither guard knew they were about to become central figures in one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in modern history. Outside, a vehicle moved through the darkness. Its destination was the museum. Its passengers carried a plan. And by sunrise, that plan would shock the entire world. The clock approached 1:24 a.m. A security guard monitoring surveillance cameras noticed something unusual. 2 police officers were standing outside the museum entrance. At first glance, nothing seemed suspicious. The men wore uniforms. They appeared calm. Professional. Legitimate. One officer signaled toward the door. The guard hesitated. Museum policy was clear. Nobody should be admitted after hours. Not even police officers. But the men insisted they were investigating reports of a disturbance nearby. The explanation sounded reasonable. Perhaps too reasonable. After a brief exchange, the guard made a decision. A single decision. One click of a button. The door unlocked. The officers stepped inside. And in that instant, the greatest art theft in history began. The men approached the security desk. One of them looked directly at the guard. Then he spoke words that immediately changed the atmosphere. "We think there's a warrant out for your arrest." At first, the guard laughed. The statement sounded absurd. But the officer didn't laugh. Neither did his partner. Seconds later, the truth became terrifyingly clear. These men were not police officers, they were robbers. And the museum now belonged to them. For the next 81 minutes, they would move through the galleries undisturbed. Room by room. Painting by painting. Masterpiece by masterpiece. When they finally disappeared into the darkness, 13 works of art would be gone forever. And the hunt for the thieves would begin.